On Sunday, the Biden administration carried out bombing attacks against what the New York Times describes as facilities used by Iran and its proxies in eastern Syria. The newspaper also called this an apparent escalation by the Biden administration to the near daily attacks on US soldiers in Syria and Iraq since October 17th. What the Times does not say is that the American presence in eastern Syria is an illegal occupation. The United States simply has no business there. Let's also recall that in 2020, the Iraqi parliament voted overwhelmingly for the removal of all US troops from that country. But at the time, President Trump warned that if Iraq tried to expel American forces, the US would place sanctions on the country even tighter than those against Iran. The American aggression over the weekend, along with the US military buildup across the region, underscores once again that Israel's genocide in Gaza is a joint project of Washington and Tel Aviv, a true expression of what leaders in both countries like to call their shared values. The American attacks also highlight that without Washington's support, the Zionist project in the region would already have collapsed long ago. So until the United States leaves the region, people will have little hope of peace and healing from the relentless and repeated bloodbaths visited on them decade after decade, but especially since the US-led invasion of Iraq. It seems natural to the US government and its loyal press that the United States is allowed to bomb, intervene wherever it likes, especially as is currently the case, so that its attack dog, Israel, can carry out a genocide in peace and quiet, so to speak. Meanwhile, Washington considers it illegitimate for Iran and any other regional powers or groups to act in solidarity with and defense of the Palestinian people and of Lebanon, which both face existential threats from Israel. The threat from Israel is not theoretical, but of course very real. Israel is a threat to everyone in the region, including, and perhaps even after the Palestinians, first and foremost, its own Jewish population. This was underscored once again in recent days by comments from top Israeli leaders. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 a member of Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet, announced on Israeli national television that, quote, "We are now rolling out the Gaza Nakba," end quote. Meanwhile, Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, warned, quote, "What we're doing in Gaza, we can also do in Beirut," end quote. I do not need to tell you how many times Israel has bombed Syria, a practically daily occurrence, and threatened to destroy Iran and Lebanon, and in fact has already done so in Lebanon several times. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and Gallant's statements are more evidence, if any was even needed, that the mass atrocities Israel is perpetrating in Gaza are not so-called collateral damage from a military campaign with legitimate military goals, but rather are the intended goal. Right now, Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City is under Israeli siege. No one can safely get in or out. Speaking from the hospital today to Al Jazeera, Dr. Munir al-Bursh said that the Israelis were playing games with people. They were sending text messages to people's phones telling them they could evacuate safely from the hospital and the surrounding area. But anyone who set foot out of the gates was immediately shot at, Dr. al-Bursh said. He pointed to the case of one young man who stripped down to his underwear to show that he was no threat and tried to leave. He was immediately shot and left lying on the street to die. Even though he could be seen from the hospital's windows, no one could reach him. Dr. al-Bursh said that dozens of bodies were lying in the streets around the hospital with no way to safely recover or bury them. The Israelis want to kill as many people as possible, he said. Without fuel or power inside the hospital, there have already been reports that patients are dying. The situation at Al-Shifa is not unique, but the norm. Medical facilities in the northern half of Gaza have been under relentless bombardment for the past 24 hours, Doctors Without Borders said on Saturday. Most hospitals have ceased functioning. Just a couple of hours ago, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society said that it is receiving hundreds of calls at its emergency number 101 from Palestinians besieged in Gaza City, with helpless cries for ambulances to attend the wounded and killed and to help evacuate families who are stuck in their houses that are subject to continuous shelling, lacking safety, water, or food. The Red Crescent said that a lot of those calling report that there are huge numbers of people trapped under rubble and dozens of injured who need emergency medical care in places that are beyond the reach of ambulances or civil defense workers. As the Israeli ground invasion advances in the north of Gaza, the Red Crescent said, preventing ambulances from access and targeting anyone who tries to move there is resulting in tens of bodies killed in the streets. Israeli propaganda has tried to give the impression that most people have left Gaza City and the north, and while thousands have, hundreds of thousands remain there. Israel wants us to believe that few people remain so that it won't be held accountable for their murder, whether by bombing, shelling, starvation, disease, or dehydration. Israel continues to lie that Hamas is using Palestinians as human shields. They're even calling patients inside hospitals human shields, as if patients would be anywhere else. The reality is that Israel considers everyone in Gaza to be a target. It is even explicitly using Palestinians as human shields, as can be seen in this image. Shaimat Ziara, a Palestinian journalist now in Canada, recognized the picture as showing her uncle and his sons blindfolded and placed near Israeli military equipment. That is the reality in Gaza. Over the last 37 days, there have been frequent communications cuts with Gaza, and it is hard to reach people there at the best of times. Now, the Palestinian telecoms company is warning that by Thursday there could be a permanent hard blackout as the generators that run their equipment run out of fuel, just like the hospitals. Gaza will go dark again, this time for good, and we will not be able to bear witness to any of the next atrocities Israel has planned in its Gaza Nakba. The sensible thing to do, the sane thing, the humane thing to do is to demand an immediate ceasefire. That's what millions of people around the world did again this weekend as they took to the streets. In London, the rally in support of Palestine is said to have been one of the largest demonstrations ever in British history. But sadly, basic human empathy and decency continue to be lacking among our so-called leaders. Not even Bernie Sanders is calling for a ceasefire. And this is what President Biden said when he was asked about it last week. None, no possibility. That's what President Biden says when asked about a ceasefire. And on Sunday, the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, repeated the Israeli lie that Palestinians use civilians and hospitals as human shields. This is tantamount to inciting Israel to commit more crimes against humanity. Borrell and any other international officials who repeat these lies and who engage in such incitement must be held personally, criminally liable as accomplices to Israel's atrocities. But despite this psychopathic insistence that Israel be permitted to continue slaughtering and expelling Palestinians to its heart's content, the public pressure is starting to have an effect. It is too slow, but it is happening. Today, Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen admitted that Israel is coming under growing pressure to stop the massacre. Quote, "From a political point of view, we recognize that Israel has come under more pressure," Cohen said. He continued, "The pressure is not very high, but it is increasing." Cohen added that, quote, "In conversations I hold with foreign ministers, they emphasize the humanitarian issue in Gaza, the aspect of their identification and shock from the October 7 massacre is reduced. There are also those who request not publicly to work towards a ceasefire." End quote. In other words, even Israel's most loyal supporters are having a tough time stomaching the scenes from Gaza. As I said, this pressure is not enough, but it's all we have, and we have to keep it up. After 37 days, Israel has achieved nothing militarily. All it has achieved is death and destruction. There is no doubt that the reason there is any pressure at all is due to the popular outrage, anger, and revulsion at this genocide. So the message is clear. We have to keep up the protests, keep raising our voices in every way and every place that we can. In closing, I want to say that Israel's barbaric methods are, by the admission of its own leaders, meant to imprint on the minds of Arabs that their genocidal settler colony is a permanent and irrevocable presence in their midst. But I would argue that it has only done the opposite. The resistance operation of October 7th, despite Israel's propaganda and lies about it, demolished and destroyed the myth of the invincible Israeli military. And the resistance in Gaza is continuing to make the enemy pay a very high price for its crimes. But the massacre and slaughter Israel is perpetrating leave no room for doubt. Living with Israel is like living with part of your house on fire. It's impossible. The fire cannot be contained to just one room, and if you don't put it out, it will eventually consume you. As the late Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme once famously said about South Africa, apartheid cannot be reformed, it must be abolished. The Zionist apartheid regime, the Zionist genocide regime must be abolished as well, once and for all, if the people of Palestine and all the people of the region are to have a future beyond this American-Israeli genocide.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.